For as much as I talk about my love for video games on here, I very rarely talk about my other love, animation. Animation is easily one of my favorite art forms out there, and just like with video games, has tons of great and memorable villains. And one of my favorite childhood shows was Wild Kratts. I'm honestly surprised I haven't made a video on anything PBS related yet. A lot of their late 2000s, early 2010s shows still really hold up. They aren't the pinnacle of television, but I could come back to an episode of a show of this era and have a good time, and Wildcats is no different. Which is why I want to take time to talk about each of the villains of the show. I do want to say, however, that similar to my Ace Attorney video, I don't think the villains are the series' strongest suit. The best episode of the show, in my opinion, doesn't feature a single villain. However, don't expect me to hate these guys and gals neither. I mean, this group is technically called the Legion of Villainous Villainhood, and how could I ever hate that name? That's just the greatest name for anything ever. At worst, these guys will score C tier, and at best, they'll score A tier, and that's fine. A tier is still, I like them. So, with all that out of the way, we're going to debut date, starting with former businesswoman Paisley Paver. I definitely think Paisley has a lot going against her. Unlike the other three villains who were all introduced in the first 10 episodes or so, Paisley was introduced in the fourth season, and only really has 3 episodes as a full villain. So, are these 3 episodes a good showing of her as a villain? She's more or less a copy of Zack, in that they're both business people who use robots to ruin nature and aren't afraid to use animals to further her goals. Even then, personality wise, she doesn't really stick out that much. I know that's kind of the point. She's supposed to come off as soulless, but again, Zack's soulless and he's pretty memorable. With that said, I do have positives. I like her design well enough. Reminds me a lot of Edna Mode from Pixar a lot. And although I did criticize it, I do like that she's a lot more grounded and calm, especially compared to her competitors. Helps make her stand out. Now, I think the Kratts realized how nothing Paisley was, and for their next movie special, they decided to give her a redemption arc, a first for the series. Now, I do think Paisley's redemption was a tad rushed. It feels like that they just showed her what would happen if she continued to be evil and boom, she's good now. There could have been more time for her to reflect on her ways. However, I really like how she was redeemed. We've never seen her react to the ocean, so it makes sense that's the reason. Plus, considering how much of a logical thinker Paisley is, I feel like she would take what Aviva said to heart. And I'll be honest, I like her more when she's redeemed. She's so enthusiastic while keeping her grounded feel. I hope we'll see more of her, but for now, I'll give her B tier. Very solid start. It gets me excited to see the other villains. Oh, and if any of you care, Rex is D tier. I do not care for Rex. Sorry. Next up on the menu is Chef Gaston Gourmand. Gourmand is a fan favorite, and I can see why. He has a lot to make him stand out from the other villains. Probably the most interesting to me is how lethal he is compared to the other villains. Unlike them, he actually wants to kill the animals by cooking them. Gourmand's pretty tough too, going up against hawks and Komodo dragons. I think what also makes him scary is he's shown to cook pretty much anything, even humans at one point. Really makes him come off as threatening unhinged. Like, he's definitely had thoughts eating the wild kratts. Another thing that makes Gourmand stand out and threatening is, as stated, he's a one-man army, meaning he's pretty smart. Honey Seekers is a great example, where Gourmand, simply from looking at animal tracks, is able to determine that the honey badger is looking for food, which is how he was able to capture the critter. Another perk of being a one-man army is all the gadgets he has. The most iconic being his dope blaster, which is creatively used to secure the kratts. However, he is more than that, as not only to be shown wielding utensils as weapons, but in episodes like Raptor Roundup, Gourmand has a freaking jetpack to catch Chris. Overall, I really like Gourmand. He's a super entertaining character. Although, my main criticism of him is he doesn't really have anyone to bounce off of, unlike the others. I think he could really benefit off of having a minion like Rex or Doppia. I don't want him to have his own army, though. Maybe a son to have him learn the ropes. Gourmand gets a B from me. And only B because he falls too short to his ancestor, great great granddaddy Gourmand, baby. You all do not understand the sheer perfection of great great granddaddy Gourmand. The reason why great great granddaddy Gourmand eclipses his Chud ancestor is because great great granddaddy Gourmand is a pirate and a chef, double the profession. He has great in the name, and he's a granddaddy. And who doesn't love granddads? The only quote unquote flaw with great great granddaddy Gourmand, which even then sounds like a sin that great great granddaddy Gourmand wastes his precious time with flaws. But he was sent to Antarctica instead of the silly bird island, which even then wasn't great great granddaddy Gourmand's fault. It was the wild kratts' fault for not letting my king, a great great granddaddy Gourmand, try dodo meat. For shame, Chris and Martin. For shame. But as for great great granddaddy Gourmand, he deserves more. Great great granddaddy Gourmand is up right there with Lucifer from Helltaker and Jack Black Steve as the greatest fictional characters of all time. In fact, great great granddaddy Gourmand is going in A tier, in a tier above S tier called great great granddaddy Gourmand tier. I thank the Lord every day that he let great great granddaddy Gourmand in this mortal realm, and hopefully I convince you too. Anyway, on the next villain. Coming up next is the fashionista Danita Donata. Now, I've avoided comparing the villains too much, but with every Wild Kratts villain, you can tell what villain the Kratts were inspired by. Like how Gourmand is very similar to Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. I bring this up because everyone and their parents have brought up that Donita and Davia are literally just Yzma and Kronk from the Emperor's New Groove. But hey, just because two villains are take heavy inspiration from another doesn't make them bad villains. Because honestly, Danita may be my favorite villain we've looked at so far. What makes her interesting to me is how behind the scenes she is. In her episodes, we usually see her get animals from the comfort of her vehicle, usually her jet. It makes her come off more professional, and by having this, we see the strengths and flaws of our heroes. Martin goes headfirst to save his animal pals, but that usually gets him captured. And Danita wants Martin because, as pointed out by this commenter, modelers like blonde hair so the clothes can stick out more. Hence her sidekick Davia, who shows how evil Danita is. You see, Davia, despite working for Danita, is actually quite the nice man and is very naive, making him a very easy target for Danita. While I don't think Danita outright abuses Davio, it's clear that she values herself over him. Above all Danita cares about is looks, hence why she keeps Davio and has eyes for Martin. This also says a lot about Chris, too. And Fireflies, it's because of Chris's learning more about the Fireflies that they were able to free Martin and the Fireflies from Danita's pose beam and save the day. Speaking of which, the pose beam, Danita's most iconic power. The beam can make any creature do Danita's being once in contact. It's notably used for turning animals to hats or other jewelry. The pose beam makes Danita a more terrifying threat than Gourmand in my eyes. At least if Gourmand succeeds, the pain will be quick. If Danita succeeds, then you'll spend the rest of your days as whatever object she wants until you slowly die. My only criticism with Danita is the fact that Wild Kratts values learning first, which isn't a bad thing, quite the opposite, in fact, but as we've seen, it gets the villains quite shafted. I'd love to have Danita more screen time in her episodes, but that's the only thing holding her back from S tier. Danita has some of my favorite episodes in the show, and I enjoy her and Davio's every appearance. A for Danita and B for Davio. And last, but certainly not least, we have Zach Varmatek, head of Varmatek Industries. Zach's easily the most popular villain in Wild Kratts, more or less the main antagonist, and for that reason, a lot of people's favorites as well. For me, yeah, he's pretty cool. The thing that catches my attention from the start is how much he serves as a foil to the Kratts in almost every way. The Kratts' designs are messy and colorful to show their optimistic outlooks. Meanwhile, Zach's design has no color and his hair is very well combed, showing his complete pale outlook. That's the thing I want to make Zach interesting. He's not. Look at his comrades, Danita and Gourmand. These two aren't at the top. Their professions involve competing with others, which makes them innocent animals. Zach, he's already at the top. He lives in a skyscraper with thousands of robots that do his bidding. He has everything he could possibly want in life. Zach thinks he's better than everyone else, which leads me to the second reason I personally love him, his attitude. Zach comes off like a spoiled brat. He thinks the world revolves around him, and that's why I love him. Take the episode Aqua Frog, for example, where Zach dumped a lot of oil into a pond because he wanted a clean plane. And after the Kratts for him, he decided to try to give them the ultimate middle finger by singing his entire ship into the pond. That to me is the perfect example of his ego. There are multiple episodes in the show where his intent is to steal the Wild Kratts stuff for kicks and giggles, and that's what makes me love Zach. and why I prefer him over Paisley. Now, don't get me wrong, I like that she displays a more cold nature, but the over the top nature Zach shows helps him stick out in my mind more. Plus, we already have an Ice Queen with Danita. Speaking of, I love how he's the glue of the Legion of Villainous Villainhood. They would not be here without him. It's also so cute to me how well he plays off of them like a friend group. I assume your only friends being robots and living in that big of a skyscraper would get pretty lonely. Honestly, I can't find anything I find wrong with Zach. Unlike Danita, he gets the perfect amount of screen time for him to stick out. I know I said how unlikely it was, but I'm doing it. Zach Pharmatech is S tier. Also, his head's in the shape of a perfect triangle! And there we have it. This was a really fun video to make. Like I said, Wild Kratts and PBS Kids as a whole hold a really special place in my heart. And I encourage you, give the show a rewatch. It's not the best show of all time, but it's a ton of fun. And let me know if you all want more Wild Kratts. I'd love to make another video on the show. The obvious answer would be a ranking of a season, but that'd be pretty lengthy. I'm sure I'll think of something. But anyway, I made some changes to the tier list during the making of this video. So click off now if you don't care about that. I'll try to keep this brief. Salvage has been bumped to A tier because it doesn't really feel right having fan work in S tier. Nightmare Springtrap is bumped to B tier as well as Sayaka and Mondo. B tier is still characters I like, I swear. Springtrap, Slenderman, and Genocide are all the same average of quality to me. Mukuro has been promoted to C tier because she's just missed potential. And Hifumi and Sawwood are D tier because that's the tier list of characters that I could care less about. Alright, I'm gonna rank Sonic songs now. Thanks for watching, everybody.